we're going to go through these slides today and kind of highlight a couple areas the different areas you can focus on. But the first one we need to start with what your goals would be. In making a time commitment. These are things you want to consider before you start your sheep and goat project. It's really a 5 to 10 month commitment or even longer, depending on what your target show is. It might be, depending on your experience level, it might be starting out to show a goat or a sheep at your county fair. If you've been in a few years, it might be to compete at a major for a self, and you've been in for quite a while, it might be to win a banner at a major. There's a lot of different expertise levels, and hard work is really the main factor for any kind of success you want to have with the sheep and goat project. Things you need to consider if you're starting from scratch would be building your pens. We'll talk about pens. Other things would be the time commitment that you're going to put in every day, feeding and watering your animals. It can really add up. It's something you're going to have to consider. We'll talk about how this project can be a family project here in a little bit, but other things, cleaning pens, then that's just taking care of the animals. Then you have to learn how to show them and train them to show. So that's going to take some time. And then, as you get ready to participate in a jackpot show or your county show, clipping that animal, washing them, drying them, that kind of thing. So as I talked about, what's your family's goal? Is your goal to try to compete at one of those major shows, or is it just to get in and make the sell slot at a county, or maybe just go out and compete and go have fun at different jackpots and things like that, and just have some quality time with your family. Then with those goals, you have to decide how much money contribute. That it can be just like any other kind of activity, whether it's basketball or trap and skeet. I mean, you can spend as little or as much as you can you can afford. So those are things you really have to think about as you determine what your goals are going to be. So I've kind of broke this up into 4 different sections: facilities and equipment. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about selection of your project and feeding and care, and then we're going to talk a little bit showmanship at the end. Facilities. There's hundreds of different facilities out there. No two are alike. When you're talking about sheep and goats, there are some common factors that you need to consider when you're working on your facilities, and you can kind of see in the picture there. Shelter is definitely one of those. We'll talk about that. Your facilities does not have to be elaborate. It can be pretty basic. Being in for 11 years and then being a stock show kid before that, I've seen a little bit of everything. You definitely want to have adequate pen space for your projects. There's 6 feet by 10 feet is kind of a good starting point. You could have a smaller or bigger than that. In this picture, you can see some pins are made of wire panels and T-post. If you want to do that, you might consider covering those T-posts with a PVC. I saw that one time before. And another real popular panel selection that you could use is right now is Rivera Custom Gates and Feeders. That's their website there. You can go online and they can pretty much you can custom order kind of what you want to build, and they have really good setup. They're really good pins. In our part of the world, in East Texas, if you wanted to spend the money, you could even have them galvanized. You'd have to do that at another place and have them hot dipped and galvanized. The main thing is on your pins, you want to have them tall enough and secure enough that you can keep your animals in and any dogs or coyotes out. So whatever you decide to use, whether you just go get some panels from Walmart or whether you go Taj Mahal and build a really nice barn and pens, that's great. But you definitely want to make sure that dogs or coyotes, any kind of predator really, cannot get to your sheep and goats. So that's here at our house. My parents run about 50 weather type breeding does, and so we have a guard dog that helps us out with that. You don't really necessarily would have to have a guard dog, but you definitely want to have your pen secure enough to keep any kind of predator out of there. Especially, we'll talk about later, exercising. If you're going to track your sheep or goat project, you definitely don't want any dogs around that area. Just to keep them, you want to have a healthy fear of your track dogs, and so any kind of pet dogs or anything, you really don't want them. Now, I feel like I'm kind of talking to myself. Casey, are we still good?
Yeah, I think we're still good. You're kind of choppy a little bit, but I mean, I'm picking up everything. I don't see any other chats. If anybody's having a problem hearing, definitely let us know in the chat box too. So I think we're good.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll keep going. The thing you want to consider on your facilities is air circulation. That's a big deal, especially for your sheep. Goats can kind of handle the heat a little bit better than your lambs can. They really, especially in these summer months that we have coming up, they're really going to need some air circulation. They're going to need some fans, kind of an open breezeway type barn. You don't want to have it too confined. Ideally, you'd like to have you're covered from north wind, so you can kind of have the north part blocked off, and then maybe kind of have a breeze through, or have some fans set up to blow some cold air in there. So goats, just by their nature, they come from South Africa. The heat doesn't really bother them as much. I mean, it could be 80 or 90 degrees and they'll be laying out in the sun. Lambs, on the other hand, especially any that are not dorpers, they're hair wool sheep, and that extra wool can really get them hot. So I definitely think about that. And then the last thing is ensuring proper drainage. You can put sand in your pens if you want to. A lot of people just have whatever regular dirt they have, but whatever it is, you want to make sure that it's properly drained. That way you're kind of on a hill maybe, and you're sloping downward, where you definitely don't have a situation where you're running uphill and your water runs down into your barns or your pens. That's not going to be a good thing at all. So with that, if you do decide to go sand route, you need to treat it for any ants, fleas, or red bugs. You can use any kind of stable insecticide. That if you start having a problem with ants, you can go in there and treat those.
You got quiet, Zach. You still there?
Yeah, I am working on there it goes. I was having trouble with my slide. Okay.
Oh, okay.
On
cool.
Facilities and equipment, it's all right. It's kind of been a long-standing thing, especially since I've been around, that a lot of the real successful guys don't feed their sheep and goat, or their two projects together. So you wouldn't want to have 2 lambs in a pen or 2 goats. I've over the years, I've kind of relaxed myself on that, especially at the beginning of the feeding period. If you've got 2 goats or 2 lambs that are the same, kind of about the same age, and they're consuming the same, looks like they're consuming the same amount of feed, they're kind of on par with each other, I definitely don't have a problem feeding those 2 animals together. And I know some people that have done really well, they feed goats together year round. It's a lot easier from a management standpoint to have them fed separate. But if any of y'all have shown goats before, you know they can get real finicky on their feed consumption. So feeding them together, or like you can see in the picture, where all the feeders are facing the same way and the goats are right next to each other, it kind of gives them a competitive vigor when you get around feeding time. Those goats get in there and you want them to fight for their feed and really go in there and eat. So that's kind of like, you can have your own preference on that. And like I said, really during the beginning part of your feeding time, that's when that's really, actually in my opinion, it's ideal to feed a couple goats together or a couple sheep together. And then as you get later on, maybe you have a fat lamb that's a lot bigger and he's beating up on a goat or a sheep that might not have put on the same amount of weight. Then it would be a good time to separate those out. If there's one fat lamb in there and one skinny lamb in there, you know that it's time for them to be separated, because one's getting all the feed and the other one's not. So that's just something, when you go out to the barn daily, you'll just have to kind of keep an eye on those if you do decide to feed them together. Watering, the main thing we do in watering is have a 5-gallon bucket. A friend of mine had a theory that goats will drink out of blue 5-gallon buckets or black better than yellow or red. I don't know about that, but whatever color bucket you decide to use, you keep it to the fence, like in the picture shown, and that way it's off the ground. And you have it clipped where they can't knock it over. So like if you just had it on the ground and it wasn't clipped, their sheep or goats would probably knock that thing over. So a lot of people say, well, why not use an automatic waterer? Because if you have a 5-gallon bucket, you're more likely to clean it, and you can really monitor the water consumption of your projects. And so it's a little bit more, there's a little bit more time element involved, but every day, if you'll go and clean that bucket out and spray fresh, clean water in there, you'll have healthier projects, and they'll look better also. So cleaning that bucket out every day can really be beneficial to you in the long run. Here's some other equipment, just things you might need. Feeders, if you're starting out from scratch. Feeders, rope halters, there's not in the picture. Water buckets, like I said, you can use a 5-gallon or even like a 2-gallon. 1 gallon can work on younger animals, but as they get older, they might drink more than a gallon. You could or if you had to in a pen, they would drink more than a gallon. Hoof trimmers, that's going to be the green handle trimmers there in the middle. Drench gun. Drench gun is actually like a 60cc drench gun that a lot of people use for goats because it has a smaller nozzle on it. They do have a bigger orange drench gun that you could use for lambs. It's got a bigger syringe on it, and it can hold more fluid. But really, these smaller goat ones have really been popular, especially for people that have goats. They just kind of take it a little bit easier. There's a mesh muzzle there. Access to scales. You don't necessarily have to have your own set of scales. It's good if you do. You can find a lot of scales online. Use show scales. They can range anywhere from 1,000 to $1,500. But I've seen a lot of different things. I've seen people that have pet scales that they got from Petco that they use for their goats. I've seen people use bathroom scales, and there's all different ways. The main thing is whatever scale you do decide to use, the main thing is having it accurate. We just have like a beam scale at our house that you can go in and kind of adjust the weights and do that way. But I've seen different people have digital ones. It's just kind of up to your personal preference and kind of your budget as far as what you want to spend on that. Another thing you want to have is fans. You can see the fan picture there. We've got all different kind of fans. We've used big shop fans before, but like the air turbos that you can get from a Sullivan Supply work really good. There's a lot of different ones too, just like anything else. The main thing, if you get one, you just want to look at the output and make sure it's blowing out enough cold air to keep your projects cool. Medicines, we'll talk more about medicines later on. Whatever project you have, sooner or later, it's going to get sick. And that's something when you're dealing with sheep and goat projects, that's going to be part of the project, is dealing with sick animals and figuring out what might be the issues with them. It seems like, even we've been raising show animals out here for 40 plus years, and you would think that we would have figured out a way to raise animals without them getting sick. But the fact of the matter is that they're going to get sick, and doctrine is going to be part of that. So you're definitely going to need some medicines, syringes and needles, and we'll talk about different dewormers here directly. Keys to success. We're off of facilities now. We're talking about different things with your project. We're going to talk about selection of your project, what to look for. We're going to talk about your part as feeding and care, and then we're going to talk a little bit about showmanship. So selection. Hard work is definitely a main key, but you spend just as much time feeding and caring for. You can spend just as much time feeding and caring for a sorry project versus a high quality one. And so that's where selection comes in, because if you go out and select the best animal you can and then work hard at it, that's where you're going to have success later on down the road. So there's different priorities that you have to think about when you talk about selection. Age is definitely going to be a big one. You can kind of plan out your calendar as far as your sheep and goat project. Muscle is going to be another important factor, because we're raising market animals, whether it's a lamb or a goat. Muscle is definitely a big consideration. Structure is right behind it, talking about how the animal moves, how it's designed, and then the rib shape of that animal. So those are all important things that we'll talk about. And then this is one note I had on here. Especially when we talk about age, like if you have a smaller exhibitor that's just starting out, you don't want to go get them a medium wool that could be 150 pounds down the road, or you don't want to get a really early goat that could be 115 pounds at show day. If you have a smaller exhibitor, you might want to tend towards a smaller breed of lamb, like a Southdown. Dorpers are kind of smaller, but they can have a little bit more attitude than some of your Southdowns can. But on the goat side, you'd want to look at maybe a younger project, just something that's easier for a young exhibitor to handle. So it's going to be pretty tough for them. It's going to be a challenge for them to try to wrangle a 100-pound goat when they could be showing like a 70 or 80-pound goat. So that's just something to think about. So here's parts of the goat. This was a reserve champion at Houston 2018. So this is a pretty good one to look at. You can see highlighted the rack is going to be that muscle right behind the shoulder blades. That's kind of the first thing that most judges will feel of. And then they'll kind of run their hand down their back and past the rib cage, you get into the loin area in between the rib cage and the hip. And so that there'll be a really good handle by the judge in that loin area. And then depending on what judge you have, a lot of them will handle the hip muscle or kind of the stifle muscle there. You can see the leg, and then kind of the lower leg is their stifle. And then on the structured part, as you go down, you can see the hock, which is kind of like that elbow joint on the back of the sheep or goat. And then the pastern is kind of right there, kind of where your toenails would be. And so that's just kind of the basic part of the goat. Of course, there's the knee and the front, on the front leg, and then the rear flank is kind of that area right there between the hip and the stomach. So as you look at a goat or a sheep, you really want them to have kind of a balanced look from fore flank to rear flank, and it just kind of makes them look smooth. That's kind of how the best way to describe balance and eye appeal on a lamb goat is you kind of want them to look smooth. They're not running downhill or running uphill. They're kind of level in their top line and in their fore and rear flank. Age, this is kind of what I was talking about. And most sheep and goats in Texas are going to be marketed kind of in the next month from May until September, mostly May until August is kind of when most sheep and goats are marketed. If you have a spring show or a spring major, typically if you count when your show day is, you want to back that ideal age off 10 to 12 months. Okay, so if you have a March show, you would want a sheep or a goat that was around February, March, and May. So really it could be 8 to 10 months, 8 to 12 months, or you could kind of get a little bit lower. Like I said, if you're looking for a smaller goat for a younger exhibitor. If you go over a year, over 13 months, I'm not going to say it's never been done, because it definitely has been. But you're going to have a lot more challenges at the end point of your project. You're going to have to exercise more to make them look youthful. You're going to have to kind of watch their diet, because they'll kind of start getting a little fat. So, and also lose their milk teeth around that age. So a lot of the Texas shows used to have a tooth rule, is what they call it, where you had to have your milk teeth. And so you didn't want anything over 12 months of age, because if you got over that 12-month period, they might lose their milk teeth. So you want to check on your county show or anywhere else you're planning to go, and make sure that they don't have a tooth rule like that. Like I said, most of the majors have kind of done away with that, and we're kind of going off of weight. But some county shows still have a tooth rule. So definitely don't want to have a project that's too old. So now we're going to talk about muscle. I think that's everybody's that's one aspect that everybody looks at when they're looking at potential projects. You can kind of see in the picture on the right, there's ripples going down that goat's top. You can kind of see the bulges, and that's really what you're looking for as far as muscle. You want a wide chest floor. You can see in the first picture in the middle of the screen, you want a wide chest floor, and basically if you have a wide body going to the ground on sheep or goats, that means that you're going to have a lot of width, a lot of muscle, a lot of mass in that project. And that's kind of what we're wanting as far as muscle. We want a lot of it. You want them to be big down their top, and then you want them to be big-ended, like the one on the bottom part. You can see how big his hip is and how wide of area he has in between his rear legs. So that's one rule to remember is heavy muscled animals always beat light muscled animals. So if you, we'll kind of look at some more pictures. You can see the bulges there on the first one on the left. You can kind of see that muscle that he has and the width that he has going down to the ground. And when you look down from the side, you can kind of see how long his hip, or how wide and long his hip is in the middle picture. And you can kind of see that turn that he has to his leg. And then on the picture on the far right, you can see the bulge that he has in his forearm. And that's really one good way, especially like on younger projects. You're looking at them, they're 2 months old, they're kind of thin. You don't know if they're going to be thick enough or not. That's one way you want to look, is in that forearm area. If there's a bulge in that forearm area on green animals, that's one thing that you want to, you've got a thicker project. All right, muscle down the top. These are on the middle two, is kind of good examples of goats that have width and squareness down their top. You can see it. You can see that bulge. You can see the depth of muscle that they have. And kind of what you might hear judges talk about sometime is the loin edge. And basically what that edge is, it's not like if you touch that top of that sheep or goat, it feels like a pipe. And you can definitely see the edges of their loin. And that's what the judge is talking about. If you kind of see one that just kind of washes away or isn't smooth, that's where they're getting kind of soft on their edges. Or like on the far right, you can see you have one that's teepee topped, where there's no muscle. It's just, you see the spine there and then there's nothing else there. So that's one you would not want. You would want one that's got a bulge and thickness right there in that rack area. Structure. The next thing we're going to talk about in selection, it's where you're putting the skeleton together correctly and flexible and functional. So one thing when you're looking at goats at a younger age, if there's one that maybe has a structural flaw, as he gets older and bigger, that flaw is going to get worse. Like if I had, we'll show some examples, but it's similar to the foundation of a house. And it keeps your foundation keeps your house supported, and that's good feet and legs is what supports your sheep or goat project. This is some good examples that kind of show, they're showing base width, but they're also showing good rear perpendicular legs they're parallel to each other and they go down to the ground straight. This is some more base width stuff, but like I talked about, base width is really important. It's getting a thick project. Here's where we're talking about the shoulder as it comes out of the top as the neck comes out of the top of the shoulder. You can see that junction right there, and that's where you want that neck to be. We'll show, there'll be some examples on here that shows the neck tying like lower into the shoulder, and that's not really good. You kind of want a neck to come out of that very top of the shoulder blades and go up. So the picture on the right is kind of showing a level top line. That picture is a little blurry. You can see, like if you went and got a level, like like on working in hardware, you could put that level up there and it would be pretty straight with that goat. That goat's really straight in his top and really straight in his underline. Okay, here's a couple problems. Here's a goat right here on the left that's steeper in his hip. You can kind of see he has a slope. That hip's not quite as square in the top part, square and level in the top part. So that would be something that you would want to change on him. And then on the right-hand side, there's a goat that we haven't talked a lot about bone size, but that's something that used to not be quite as much of a big deal as it is now. But bone size is really important. You want a big boned animal, skeleton, and so this one kind of gets finer bone, smaller. So that's something that you don't want. You want one a little bit thicker and more bone width to them. Here's a couple bad examples of structure. The one on the left is cowhocked, where his hocks go in and his toes go out. Or on the right-hand side, it shows a toed out, where the toes on the back are going out. They're pointing away from the front of the goat, and that's not what you want. You want them to be square and kind of in line with the rest parts of that sheep or goat project. The design, we're going to talk about that. It kind of goes into balance. Do they take a pretty picture from the side? Are they elevated in the profile? Well, let me back up. The amount of fill, we're not going to talk about that. Design is good, like a first impression. There's my wife, she's really big on first impressions to a particular project. So if you go in there and pin, you see 10 lambs and there's one that really hits you hard, that's kind of your first impression. And so that's, or another way of saying eye appeal. So that's something that you really want to think about as you look at your project. Rib shape is really important. It dictates how wide a rack or a loin you can have on your project. It can affect the look from the side, because if they don't have a good rib shape, they'll kind of look flat-sided. And basically, here's where we're showing flat rib versus round. So round rib, or the flat ribs will be really flat. That rib cage will be kind of straight up and down. Where round rib cage will be a lot wider. Kind of goes back to the base width we were talking about. The wider the rib cage, the wider the top line you're going to have in your sheep or goat. So you really want to make sure that you have good rib cage on that animal, because that's where you can get all your muscle from. So that's kind of a good example and bad example. The one on the left, you can see kind of has, that goat has good body to him. He's got, his rib cage is not super bad, or not, you don't want to go too far. I mean, you can go too far in anything, but I'd say he has a good rib cage. He's really round ribbed. There's plenty of muscle in his top line. The goat on the right, you can see he gets really flat. His rib cage will not allow him to have any more muscle in his top than he has probably in that picture there. So I hope you can see the differences on the picture. I know we're not doing this in person, but I hope you can see the texture and muscle density in the goat on the left versus kind of a plainer, flatter look to one that needs more rib on the right. So we kind of talked about this goat earlier, and kind of just talking about an overall design. There's one that's level topped. He's near level. There's never going to be a goat that's 100% level in his hip, but you can get one that's really good, really good. That's one that's really good in the picture. His foreflank and rear flank are equal. His neck, this is a really good example of what I was talking about on their neck coming out of the top of their shoulder blades. That goat's neck just kind of pops straight up, and that's kind of what you're looking for when you're looking at neck placement. And then the elevated chest floor, if you look kind of where the young man's knee is, you can kind of see that's where the goat's chest should be. There's no brisket there or bulge there where he's got a deep chest floor. And so that's what you want. You want an elevated chest floor, really clean look. And that goat does that really well. Here's a couple of good examples if you want one to look at. The goat on the left is one that we talked about. That neck placement's really good. His hip and hind leg are really good. The other one's really square in his structure and his base width. He goes down to the ground wide. It's kind of what we talked about wanting. So those are all good goat prospects for looking at one to probably that goat in the middle, we could have that tail head come up a little bit. We'd like to change that, but other than that, a couple pretty good prospects. So the selection wrap up, we can probably go on and on this, but just a couple of things. You definitely want to consider muscle. You definitely want to consider structure and balance. You want to think about age, especially at your endpoint. You want to think about rib shape. Does anybody have any questions on selection? If you want, you can just type them in the chat box and Casey will tell me. When we're thinking about selection, don't think that's something that you have to do alone. There's your advisors, whether it's your extension agent like me, Casey, or your FFA advisor. Maybe it's a breeder that you used in the past. Most of those people are really receptive on helping you with your project, and really trying to help you be successful. So that's kind of the main goal at the end is if you ask and you're really putting your best foot forward, people are going to help you as much as they can. Another person that you could visit with is experienced goat people. That's what we did when we showed lambs. A couple of years, we had a guy that had been around and had been winning, and we went and asked him for help. And so I really, that's another person that you definitely don't want to take for granted. And it kind of goes the same way. Like if they see you putting in the effort, they're going to help you out as much as they can. Choosing a breeder. This can be kind of one of the most difficult things in stock showing. You can find a breeder that their goats do really well one year, and then the next year you don't have as much luck, and so that can really be tough. Things to consider is how far do you want to travel, because sheep and goat breeders, especially in Texas, can live out in San Angelo. They can be down in the valley or kind of in southern South Texas. There can be, anywhere you want to look, there's goat breeders. Central Texas, North Texas, from Wichita Falls. I mean, you can go anywhere and everywhere and you'll find a sheep or goat breeder. The old things that you can, especially nowadays with the Texas raised meat goats, the Breeders Association, you can go on there and you can kind of see who's winning. The same thing with the Texas Lamb Breeders Association. You can go to their website and see who's winning, who's doing well, and so that might be a good place to start. Those breeders might charge a little more than you want to pay, so that can kind of be a problem. But you definitely want to start looking at a successful breeder and kind of go from there. There's different sales. You can attend sales, like for you lamb guys. A lot of people know about Young Gun Sale. It's a sale that they do in Brownwood every year. It'll be coming up next month. Well, I guess it will be. With the COVID-19, I think they'll have online platforms that you could bid on projects. I know most people, they're going to have showing of animals before sales, and then maybe the bidding might be online. So with the coronavirus going on, that's going to be kind of a change than just going to a sale and bidding on a project. So you might want to talk to your potential breeder ahead of time and set up a time to go look. I'm a big proponent of looking at your projects. The last thing you want to do is just find one that looks good online and start clicking on an online sale until you buy one. That's not a good way to do it. I'm not trying to throw somebody under the bus, because that's the only way to market some right now. But I'm just saying, if at all possible, you need to try to make an appointment with a with a particular breeder to go look at those animals in person. I know most breeders will definitely allow you a time to go look at a project before you purchase it. Things you'll want to ask your breeder is maybe, when do you think this goat would look good? They might know who your judge is. You can tell them, do you think that this guy would like this goat or this lamb? And most of those guys will know. When has your project been dewormed? Have they had a CD&T shot, which is an overeating shot? We'll talk a little bit more about that, but most breeders will give 1 to 2 CD&T shots, but I recommend that you do your own CD&T shot when you get your project home. When you're given that, it can sometimes make a little on the side, so you'd want to think about giving that shot on the non-show side. And they'll also tell you what type of feed they're on. They might even give you some feed to take with you. Not everybody does that, but some people will, just to kind of keep them on feed. And so that's something to think about. And then most people will be receptive to, like if you want to send them a couple of pictures or send them an email and just say, this is kind of where we're at with the goat. What do we need to do, or what do you suggest? That's something that most guys will be receptive to some feedback during the feeding period. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about goat feeds. No one goat feed is made the same. There's plenty of goat feeds out there. There's a few that are popular right now that I put in the slideshow. Show-right is going to be Advancer Plus, which is a 15% protein and 3.5% fat. Most feeds, show feeds, like whether you're talking about pigs, cattle, sheep, or goats, most of them, a lot of the important parts that you want to consider is protein and fat. On goat feeds, they're going to be anywhere from 15 to 17. So like the Advancer Plus is 15% protein, 3.5% fat. The Jacoby is 16 and 15, whether you feed pink tag or red tag. And the Jacoby, the Show-right Advancer is going to be a textured feed. So it's like it's going to be pelleted. So it's got little bitty pellets. Everything's kind of all combined into one. The Jacoby is textured. So that means that it's got barley in it. It's got, it could have oats in it. It's going to have like a protein supplement. There are going to be all these different things in the feed that goats can kind of pick through. Sheep don't usually pick through a whole lot. Mainly that's going to be goats. Also, the third feed, Mormon's Amino Gain, is 16% protein and 5% fat. It's going to be a pelleted feed. So really, the Advancer and the Mormons are going to be pelleted, and then the Jacoby is going to be textured. You got anything in the texture?
Not yet.
All right. I'm going to get my slide to move, and we'll talk about plan feeds for a little bit. Lamb feeds, Jacoby can be fed to sheep or goats, so it's one to feed. You could definitely feed the lambs. Also, Purina has a really good lamb feed on your medium wools and some of your crosses. You could feed a 15% protein. On your South Downs, you might want to consider a higher protein, lower fat, like a 18%. Also, another they have Showrat has a lamb feed. It's kind of a newer lamb feed. It's Nukem. If I can get my slide to change, I'll show you guys that. Mormons really don't have a lamb feed. They goat thing. Like I said, there's going to be different ones that you can use, but the main thing is you want to keep an eye on that protein content and fat content. Anywhere between 3 to 4% on the fat, and like I said, 15 to even 18% on the protein. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so like I talked about, there's a couple examples of some different lamb feeds. I know there is some goat guys that will, if their goat has a problem eating goat feed, they'll put in some lamb feed. Like if you're feeding Advancer, they might put in a little bit of that Nuco lamb feed to kind of get them going, get them eating it. That's something that I would just kind of, definitely wouldn't start off doing. I would start off because like the slide says, these feeds have been formulated by professional nutritionists, and so really it's good to kind of trust their recipe and the way they have their feed mix, because a lot of times they really they put a lot of time into it and they really know what they're doing. Feed consumption on your projects, you want it to be anywhere from 2.5 to 3%. So just quick math, if you had 100-pound lamb, you would want to feed them about 3 pounds per day. That number can fluctuate a little bit. Like on those 40-pound goats, they might not quite eat a little over a pound. They might eat 3/4 pound twice a day. Well, that'd be 1.5 pounds. So that's kind of the 2.5 to 3% is kind of where you want to be. You don't want to be a whole lot above that or a whole lot below that. One thing as far as mixing feeds, the sheep have a higher toxicity to copper than goats do. With sheep, if you're over 25 parts per million, you'll get a copper toxicity on sheep. So you can feed a goat lamb feed, but you cannot feed a lamb goat feed because the copper is going to be too high. So any feed your goats, you definitely want to check, or your lambs, you definitely want to check the copper content. Supplements, there is some benefit to supplements, but as long as you've got one looking as best you can, he's eating good, he's healthy, he's got clean water every day, clean feed, you don't have to get on a whole lot of supplements. There can be some supplements that will help you do certain things. If you have a skinny one that you need to get fat on, you can use a fat supplement. If you have one that's a little bit flatter in its top and you want to pop its top, you use a protein supplement. But you don't want to go feed them supplements just to say that you're feeding them supplements, because those supplements are made for a specific purpose. And if you're not utilizing it for that, it's not really helping you. Plus, it gets expensive. Those supplements can be expensive. And then a third type of supplement would be your health or conversion, like a probiotic, that will kind of help those sheep or goats convert their feed better. Here's a couple examples of fat supplements. Basic Science has the Energy Plus. There's a Power Fat Chester has. Power Fuel is one I've used before. That's something that Purina makes, and Mormon's Fast Bat. You can use Dine. When you're using Dine, you want to mix it with 50% water and 50% Dine. It'll kind of turn white looking. And then depending on how big your animal is, you could give 20 to 30 cc's, or anywhere from 15 to 30, depending on the project. But like I said, I wouldn't get a whole lot of supplements going, especially at the beginning of the feeding period. Probably when you want to start using a lot of supplements, it's kind of when you get it in the last 3 months of your feeding period, when you realize there's something that you need to change about your animal, and that's when you want to utilize that supplement. It's not something that you want to use at the very first few months. You want to use mainly just your straight ration and good clean water. Here's a few protein supplements that you can use that will add amino acids to their diet. Octane Champion Drive, the one in the middle, is a really good one. It does have 5% fat, so it will add more of a pop because it's 32% protein, but it won't necessarily make a fat one skinny. The Fitter 35, if you feed it, it will burn. If it has enough amino acids in it, it will burn some of the fat off. So if you're questionable on cover, you wouldn't want to use Fitter 35. You would want to use Champion Drive. But if you got one that's super fat, Fitter 35 might be the best option. And like it says at the bottom, you want to talk to other people that have fed this stuff before if you haven't fed it. Like I've fed a lot of the Purina type products. I haven't fed the mass makers much. So if I did feed that, I would definitely visit with somebody that's used it before I started using it. Health conversion supplements. There's Top Shelf by For You to Win. We haven't talked about them. They have a lot of supplements that can do a lot of the things, whether it's protein or fat. Sure Champ is going to be kind of in Gluco, VitaCharge. Those are all going to be probiotics, the gut candy that will help your animal convert and just kind of stay healthy, stay on feed, stay with a strong appetite. Typically what I personally do is we'll give like 5 or 10 cc's of like a VitaCharge or ProBias just once a week, just to make sure that your project has adequate gut health. The goal of the feeding is you want to help your animal reach its genetic potential. I strongly suggest that you feed twice a day, if not 3 times a day. The best thing for most people is to feed 2 times a day, so morning and night, about 12 hours apart. So if you did 7 in the morning, then you would want to do 6:30, 7 at night. Every once in a while people have to leave out of town, maybe an hour or 2 different. I mean, I totally get that. It is a general rule. You want to try to be consistent with your feeding. So you might be 12 hours apart, but you're feeding at 4 in the afternoon one day and 4 in the morning, and then the next day you're feeding at 7 in the morning and 7 at night. You don't want to do that. You want to be as consistent as you can. It will help that animal not to stress as much. You want to try to feed 7 a.m., 7 p.m., 7 days a week. So just keep that in mind. You can use a small amount of alfalfa hay on sheep or goats just to kind of get some roughage in their system. Usually if I do that, I just grab a handful with my hand, like a small handful, and I might just give them that like every 3 or 4 days. There is some trends going right now where we're kind of taking a little bit deeper sided animal. And so some, especially in the sheep barn, some guys are moving away from alfalfa and feeding more of a coastal hay or a Sudan type hay. And so that's another option for a roughage that you can use. Usually 45 to 60 days, so about 2 months away from showtime is when you kind of want to start exercising, if you're gonna consider that. It's just like we're just like bodybuilders. You don't want a sheep and goat that can go run a marathon that's really long and skinny. You want one that's got some bulk to him, kind of like a bodybuilder. And so what most bodybuilders do is they'll get a little excess calories, they'll get a little bit fat, and then that's when they'll really go to exercising. And what you want to do on that is we'll talk about exercising a little bit. Yeah, I'll save that. Watch feeding at all times. If you go and dump feed in the trough and your Freddie the lamb is usually up there with his head in the trough every single day, and you go out there and he's kind of laying down and not looking like he cares about feed, he's probably sick. And the best way to tell if your animal doesn't have an appetite that he normally has, that's a real red flag that you've got some kind of problem. One thing that I didn't include on the equipment I should have is like a rectal thermometer. That's the best way to check temperature on sheep or goats. If it's over 103, then he's definitely got a fever and he needs some antibiotics or some kind of treatment, take him to the vet or whatever you need to do. So sheep and goats' body temperature is around 101.5, so it's a lot warmer than our body temperature of 98.7. So just keep that in mind. If you go out there and it's 101, you're in good shape. Some other things to look at during feeding time is urinary calculi. That's basically a disease that is similar to kidney stones. What happens is the calcium phosphorus ratio gets off. Maybe it just kind of happens, and so if you want to make sure they have a full flow of urine, and like if you ever see your goat urinate, if it looks like they're trying to urinate and they belly, that's when you know that you probably have urinary calculi. A couple treatment options for that. One is vinegar and water. I would definitely advise against vinegar and water, because what happens if you dump a bunch of vinegar in the water because you think your goat's having a little bit of trouble, you put the vinegar in there, well, then he's not going to drink any water at all. So what I would do is ammonium chloride in the feed. You could there's mineral supplements. One's Right Track Mineral that has ammonium chloride in it, or you could kind of get some and maybe just do like a third a teaspoon just every once in a while. So ammonium chloride is just kind of a good variation to kind of break up any urinary calculi that you might get in sheep or goat. Another healthcare type thing is pesticide or parasite control. You want to have a really strict deworming schedule on sheep and goats. You can worm every 21 days, but what I would suggest is talking to your local vet and seeing if they would approve a 15-day, maybe every 2 weeks. That's probably what I would do, and then rotate wormers. So it's something that's off-label. You definitely want to visit with your vet about it before you did it. But if you worm every 2 weeks, that kind of breaks up the reproduction cycle, because the reproduction cycle, like on a barber pole, 21 days. So if you waited every 21 days, you're going to miss, and you worm, you're going to miss a lot of the immature worms that you can't kill with a wormer. So that's why I suggest, I know a lot of guys that's worked for them is worming every 2 weeks, and they rotate their wormers, where if you use ivermectin one time, like a lot of people will do a clear wormer, and basically that's like an ivomec or a cydectin that kind of looks like water, colored water. They call it a clear wormer, versus a pasty wormer, like a Safeguard or Valbazin. Those are kind of ones that kind of have a white color look to them. And so a lot of people will do one One time they'll do a clear wormer, the next time they'll do a white wormer. A couple of symptoms: wet weather, warm weather with green growing grass, and really about as far as the producer side, we're really looking out for parasites, because here in April, May, June, that's when internal parasites are really active. The barbel pearlworm, what you'll kind of look for on them is they'll have a swelling under their jaw, kind of called bottle jaw, and they'll have a light colored or anemic look in their eyelids. And so that's one thing, if you have one with swelling under the jawline or light colored eyelids, that they could have an infestation of barbel pearl. Coccidia, there could be some that are asymptomatic, which means that they don't show any symptoms. But a lot of times, if you have a poor feed conversion, like say you've been feeding one and they're eating good, they've been eating good for 3 weeks, they haven't had any trouble eating, but they're not putting any weight on. Or you might have one that's, you have a coccidia infestation, or you could have like a bloody, kind of dark looking diarrhea. That's another telltale sign. A lot of times, if you have a really bad infestation, you'll have that diarrhea, and that's kind of the summer type thing. There's some different coccidia stats that you can use. Probably the best bet on that would be to talk to your vet and get some medicine from him that probably would be off-label. There's not a lot of good coccidia stats on the market that will be effective compared to what you can get from your vet. Hoof trimming, the next thing we're going to talk about. You can kind of see in the diagram there, it kind of shows the angle that you'd want to trim the hooves. Basically, if I was in person, I would kind of turn my hand over and kind of show you the pad of my hand where my thumb is, and that's kind of the pad of the goat hoof, and kind of where you see that heel area. And then the walls or the sides, that's going to be where it really gets dug out and overgrown, and you can kind of look. You want to trim that pad down, but you're really going to have to trim on the walls of the hoof. And when you get done with it, you kind of want to have it flat and level. Yeah.
Hey, sorry, your slide hasn't changed yet, showing that on my end. There we go.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right. So sorry about that, but yeah, on the left-hand side, it shows the hoof that's overgrown, and then it kind of shows what it looks like underneath. And then kind of as you go to the right, it will kind of show where you trim that excess off, and you kind of get a level, smooth hoof there. Goats are going to be a little bit more forgiving than sheep. It's hard to quick a goat. With sheep, they can be a little bit more tender-footed. That's why you can trim every 4 to 6 weeks. If you see any pink tissue, you want to stop, because that means you're about to get in the quick. And with that said, you definitely don't want to, like the day before the show, decide you need to trim hooves, because if you have a and you quick one, they're kind of limping, well, then you don't want to go to the show like that. So I would definitely recommend like 6, 7, 8 days out before a show, if you're doing any hoof trimming. Some other stuff to think about is scours. If they back off feed, or if they have scours, you want to back off feed and maybe give more coastal hay. That can kind of settle them out. You can get some scour halt over the counter at Tractor Supply, or kaopectin's kind of similar to Pepto-Bismol. Then the other thing I would definitely look at if we had scours would be coccidia. That's something that's really prevalent and can really cause scours. The other thing would be maybe if you had one that got in the feed one night and had 2 or 3 pounds more feed than they should have, then you would probably have some scours. So that's kind of where you're talking about backing off feed. If that does happen, because I know it does, that's when you'd want to back one off of feed and just give them hay for a little bit and kind of let their digestive system get back to normal. Maybe give them a little mineral oil and go from there. Foot rot, that can be something that can happen, especially if you have really wet pins. You'd want to use an antibiotic on that, like LA200, or you could do a zinc sulfate bath. If you keep your hooves trimmed and you keep your animals in a dry area, a lot of times that won't be a problem. Runny nose. If you have clear runny noses, that won't be a really big issue. The time you really want to pay attention is if you have like a dark yellow or greenish runny nose, and that's when you probably want to do like antibiotics or talk to your vet, and maybe give them a round of LA200 or Baytril. We use a lot of and so that's Baytril. It's a little bit easier on their stomach. If you use Nuflor, that's a good medication, but it can be kind of hard on their stomach. So if your vet tells you to give one a shot of Nuflor, just know that they might go off feed one night, maybe the next morning, before they get back going again. It's just kind of hard on their stomach. There's where we talked about coccidia. There's Corid or Solnomet you can put in the water, or you can drench, like I think it says that do 15 mLs for 5 days in the water, or you could just drench like 3 mL per day for 5 days. And make sure they get it that way. So that's another good option on Corid. Pink eyes is another health issue to keep an eye on. If you kind of see that cloudy eye, a lot of times it happens in goats, or it's got kind of watery eye coming down the cheek. It get glassy and blue. That's where you'd want to talk to your vet and maybe do like a LA200 treatment on that. Ringworm. This is something I didn't have in the slides before, but I wanted to add that in because it's definitely something that happens in sheep. It can happen in goats as well. Basically, anytime you go to a show, you definitely want to put a fungicide on your sheep or goats, because what happens is you'll have one goat out there that has a fungus on it, it's barn itch or ringworm, anything like that, and that judge will handle that animal, and then he'll handle your animal. And what happens is you'll get that fungus on your animal. So anytime you go to a jackpot show, a practice show, any show that's not going to be terminal, and you're planning to show that animal again, he needs to be sprayed off after you get out of there. There's a couple different disinfectants, shampoo-like products that you can use. Ring Out Concentrate is one you can find. There's a Lime Dip Plus you could get from your vet. It's kind of got a lot of sulfur in it. It smells really bad, but it works. Captan's like a vegetable fungicide that you can get, like for tomatoes, that you can use. Those are all kind of preventatives. Fungal that Sullivan's makes that you can use, but just remember that you have to spray your animals to prevent fungus after a jackpot. The fluid film there, the picture there, that's not an animal product. It's actually something that you can get at your Tractor Supply type stores or your John Deere store. It's a lubricant, and it basically seals that ringworm off, so it can't get it. The ringworm can't get any air to it, and it kills that ringworm. It can get kind of messy, so if you do use it, you want to make sure that you have a blanket on, and kind of keep that same blanket on, and just spray that fluid film on there twice a day until you have hair growth coming back, and it looks like that ringworm's gone. It'll probably take a couple weeks. Another health consideration is sore mouth. That's something especially goats get. Some sheep get it, but it's blisters that can be around the mouth or even on the ears. The treatment for it, there's a lot of wives' tales that, and I know we've wiped diesel rags on, and that can be one thing that you could try. Another thing is the gelatin violet. has been known to help ease blisters, but the main thing you're going to have to do is kind of run its course. And just, if you have an animal like that, you definitely want to keep him separate. If possible, you want to kind of keep him muzzled. I've seen one that's really bad, that where the sheep kept rubbing his legs, and so then he got sore mouth all over his legs. It was bad. You don't want that. If you can do to kind of contain that virus, it's a virus, it's what it is. Whatever you can do to kind of contain that to one animal, don't share feed pans with other lambs, stuff like that. You definitely want to do it. There is a vaccination I learned about a year or two ago that you can use. I think it would, if you've had sore mouth in the past, or you bought projects from a guy and you know that his sheep or goats have had sore mouth just in their herd, it wouldn't hurt to do that vaccine. You can get it at Valley Vet or anywhere like that. You can just punch that in there and purchase that online. It's also a pneumonia vaccine. I don't think it's in the slides. That's another vaccine that's kind of optional. Like I would say the sore mouth and the pneumonia vaccine are kind of optional. The one you definitely have to do is CD&T. That needs to be done. Just give them a booster when you get home, and that way you don't have to worry about it. Exercise. We took care of feeding and healthcare. Now we're kind of going to exercise. There's a few different options you can see. It should be coming up soon. There's the track on the bottom left, the treadmill in the middle, and a walker on the right-hand side. Tracks can be really good because you have a dog chases a little sheep, and they get some adrenaline going. Really, on the treadmill or the track, you don't want to do more than 2 or 3 minutes, especially if they're starting out. It needs to be less than that. So you want to start off with like a minute or so for a few days, maybe a week or so, kind of get them. First thing is you don't even want to turn the dog in there. You want to turn the lamb out, let them run around the track, get used to the track, and just kind of let them figure all that out. Maybe run them on foot for a week or two, and then kind of gradually bring your dog in and run with the dog. You can exercise more than one lamb at a time. Medium wools and crosses and fine wools, they'll kind of run good together. South downs and Dorpers would run good together. If you have a slow south down and fast goat, you could put those two together. But a lot of times the lambs are going to be faster than your goats will be. Treadmill is a good option because weather can really be a big hurdle with the track. Because if it rains, you can't track. It's be too slippery. The treadmill, if you have it inside and covered, it's something that you could use anytime. You won't get the adrenaline rush that you get from the track, but it can definitely be a benefit to your sheep or goat project. You can run forwards or backwards. If you're going backwards, you just got to be careful not to overdo it, because you can wear those dew claws off on the back legs, just kind of make them sore. So just make sure they're not getting down too far on that treadmill. Like I said, the max you want to do there is like 3 minutes, maybe a little more, a little less, anything crazy. The walker, a little longer on, you can put multiple animals on there. It's not going to be a real fast walker. It's going to be kind of a more methodical thing. Just kind of letting them get used to keeping their head up and walking around and things like that. It's not going to really burn a lot of fat, to build muscle. It's just going to be kind of more of a maintenance type. If you don't have a walker and you don't have a track and you don't have a treadmill, the next best thing is to release and run. So you could go, a couple 100 yards away from your house or away from your barn right before feeding time, and walk the animals out there, turn them loose, and chase them back. And that's something that my wife did growing up. That's the only thing they had. So maybe that's right up y'all's alley. It doesn't cost a lot, just a little bit more physical labor. So those are a couple different options. On the track, it should be changing slide soon. You want a 40-foot diameter, and you want your track to be about 3 or 4 feet wide. And then the straightaways, you want about 60 or 70 feet, give or take. And you want to make it a little bit wider on the turns than on the straightaways. So if you're doing 3 foot, 3 foot on straightaways, you want to do 4 foot on the turns. Just give them a little extra room making those corners. How much depends on the animal and the amount of cover. If you know you got one that a Southdowne that stays fat and he needs a lot of exercise, then you might be running every other day for 3 or 4 minutes a day. If you have one that's just kind of thin or just kind of moderate, not really thin but not really fat, maybe you just want to put them on the track once or twice a week just to kind of give them some extra time out there. But the last thing you want to do is put a really thin animal into an exercise program. That's where we're going back to that marathon runner look that I talked about, like the long, skinny Ethiopian marathon runner. That's what you're going to get if you put a skinny animal on a track and run them, or on a treadmill and run them. You do not want that. So really be considerate of that. Maybe you have one that you never put into exercise program because he doesn't need it. It's too thin. That's something to think about. I know one guy that won the middleweight goat banner at Houston one year, and he never put his goat on a track. So just don't think you have to. Just really pay attention to your animals and look and see what your animal's telling you to do. But here's 90 seconds of hard running. So, okay.
We got a question. How fast on the treadmill?
You want kind of a really good gait. I mean, I wish I had one of those treadmill dials kind of in front of me. But what I would do is kind of start off with the walks. So probably like one of the slower settings, 1 or 2. And then maybe work it up a little bit more than that. But I wouldn't go super fast, because that's where, like I said, if you have one that they can't keep up, then that's where you're going to have the trouble with the rubbing their dew claws on that treadmill. So I would definitely, if you make your own treadmill, I've seen some people convert human treadmills to or goat treadmills, and basically what I mean by that is, on a lamb or goat treadmill, there'll be a platform that they set their front feet on, so their front feet hardly ever move on a treadmill. Basically, mainly you're working that back legs. Those back legs, you're working the hip muscles, you're working the loin. So I definitely wouldn't get super fast on that. I guess I don't know if that's a really technical answer or not, but I would just kind of be careful and kind of just maybe just gradually increase it as you go until you get to where you think that's about all they can handle, and then don't go any further than that. So, and like I said, it doesn't have to be long, 90 seconds, a minute or two. Good enough. Does that answer the question?
Yes, looks like it does. He said thanks.
Okay. Now we're going to talk a little bit about showmanship. Showmanship is something that, if you definitely want to go out there and compete for a showmanship buckle, you're going to have to put a lot of hard work in at the house. And what I tell people is, if you're going out for showmanship and you're doing a good job showing, this is basically your show off time. And what I mean by that is you're showing off all the hard work that you've put into that project for the past 6 or 8 months. So spending time at home, spending, a little time each day, making sure that goat has his head up, making sure he's bracing. And we'll talk about that, how to do that. All those you spend time on at the house, that's where you get ready for a showmanship class, and then you go out there and get after it. at the show. So, like I said, there's we're going to the next slide there. It talks about planning ahead and circling off some dates for when shows are going to be. And something else to consider is knowing the weight breaks. Most major shows, they will have a listing, or you can find a list somewhere on the internet that will show the weight breaks for like the past 3 or 4 years. And that will kind of help you decide as you get closer to showtime what class you think your animal needs to be in or could be in, that type of thing. That's not so much on jack butt shows, that'd be more for your bigger major shows or maybe your county show. And then another thing we haven't talked about is weightbacks. With lambs, you have a 5-pound weightback. So say you turn, your lamb weighs 130. Legally, you could write down 125, and you could take your lamb in there and they weigh it, and it weighs 130. You would be within the limit because there's 5 pounds. On goats, it's 4 pounds at most shows, and you want to check the rules on that before you assume it. But most shows, it's 4 pounds on goats, 5 pounds on lambs. You don't, if you're turning in your own card, you don't have to take extra weight off. But a lot of times that's just kind of playing the game. Most experienced show families are going to kind of play with those weights to try to get their, because basically you'd want to get a heavier animal in a lighter class if you could do it within the limit. So be aware of that and just kind of take that into consideration about the weight back. And then also what you want to consider is your drug withdrawals. So basically on every drug, and even the ones that you get over the counter, if it's for lamb and goats, it will have a withdrawal date. Like it will say this medicine must not be used 21 days before slaughter. So basically what that tells you is you cannot, like if it's penicillin, I think penicillin might be 20 or 30 days. So you cannot give a shot of penicillin 30 days before the show if you have a drug test. And most major shows do, a lot of county shows, all major shows do, most county shows do. And that goes for the wormers too. Like on your IVMAG, your safeguard, those are you need to plan your deworming calendar out too, because you're going to have to make sure you're in compliant and you're following those withdrawal dates. Every withdrawal date is different for different medicines. So the best thing to do is look on the back of the bottle and see on there what that withdrawal date is. Like I said, we talked about practicing at home. There's a lot of different things that we can do in practice. You can attend clinics or jackpots and just go out and compete and watch people show. Find somebody that's a really good showman that usually is having a pretty good day. They're winning some classes, they're doing well, and maybe are a little older, and kind of watch them and watch what they do. And you could say that, okay, they're doing that really good, and I'm not doing that good. So that kind of gives you an idea. It gives you an idea, too, on how their goat acts. Maybe you need to spend a little bit more time working with your goat on learning to keep his head up. So that's just something, being really observant and stock showing can really help you in the long run. On training and leading, it's a two-person job. You don't want to be, the last thing you want to do is have somebody out there by themselves. Say, just go teach that lamb to lead. It's not going to work real well. You need to have 2 people out there. Sheep and goats have a really strong herd mentality. They'll be being by themselves. Cattle are kind of okay. Pigs really don't care, but sheep and goats hate being by themselves. And so if you drag one lamb outside the lead, well, it's not going to work too good because he don't like being out there by himself. So I would suggest you still need to trim the lead. I'm not saying you don't, but it might be best if you have one person with one lamb and another person with another lamb, and you're training those lambs to lead together. Kind of the more they get used to that, the more they get used to having the halter on, the more they get used to being led around, the easier it will get. Because of course, if you go to a show, you're going to have to leave, if you have two goats, you're going to have to leave one of them in the stall and go show the other one. So, but I definitely would not start out taking one animal out of the barn and trying to teach him how to lead by himself, because it's going to be a train wreck, honestly. You need to have two animals out there, and if you have to, if you don't have to, I understand that. You would want to have somebody in front and then another person back behind, so that if you just have one animal, you want to have somebody in front of the animal, or just holding the halter and then somebody behind it. On goats, you can pull an ear. Sometimes that'll help them when they don't want to go. You could get a brush or a broom behind the animal. Maybe that'll kind of coax them along, or do some kind of clapping behind them. Anytime you're pulling an animal, you want to have them kind of to your side. You don't want to be pulling with you in front of the animal. You want to kind of be to the side of the animal where they can see daylight. So that's something to consider too. And then when you get tired or you get frustrated, just go ahead and take a break, because if you get stressed out and the parent gets stressed out, go take a break, eat dinner, and then go with it. Either go with it from there that day, or try it again the next day, because just like anything, if it's a family project, it can get kind of frustrating. All right, there's walkers that we talked about. Walkers can be really good because they're teaching an animal to walk, and they're also teaching it to hold its head up. And if you put animals on a walker, you definitely don't want to leave them. So don't leave them on a walker and somebody haul butt inside. Even if you have to stay out there and somebody's got a Game Boy or whatever they're playing, or maybe they're looking at Facebook, the ideal thing would be for them to watch the whole time. But I would rather have somebody out there on Facebook than somebody inside not paying attention. So if you tie an animal up, or you have them on if you have them on a walker, you need to be paying attention. I know somebody that won San Angelo multiple times, and they know better. They know they should, but they love to go on a walker, and he ended up hanging himself. So, because he stopped walking, or I think it was a lamb. Anyway, he stopped walking, and he just kind of sold up, and then that was it. So, after about 45 seconds, if a goat or a lamb kind of chokes down, that's really about it. You just make sure you're out there with your project. If you're not out there, then don't tie them up, or don't put them on a walker. This kind of goes with that. This is kind of like a quick release that you can use. Like some guys will have bungee cords running down from a rafter, and they clip it to the goat's chain, or they clip it to the lamb's halter, which is really good. I highly encourage using the bungee cords and using them that way. But you can get a safety clip on there, and basically you pull that clip up and it'll release. It's called a quick release snap. So that's something that you would want to consider. When you start your lambs to lead, what I usually start doing is by tying them to the fence with another animal for 10, 20, 30 minutes, kind of build that up. And then I'll start tying them to the bungees at that point. Maybe for about 20 or 30 minutes every day or every other day, kind of get them used to having that head up. Because if your sheep or goat will learn to keep their head up, it just makes it that much easier on the exhibitor having to fight them all the time. So that's something I'd really encourage. Just make sure you're there when you're training them. And practice. Training to brace. It's like most things, it's a two-person job for a beginning showman. A lot of people get them on a stand, or what we call bracing tables. Like I made a bracing table out of a 4x8 piece of plywood with wooden legs under it. Kind of looks like a big platform with I guess it would be outdoor carpet, and kind of gives some texture so they're not just slipping on wood. They've got some texture to hold themselves on. We glue that outdoor carpet down, and that's what we use. And because if you get them on the edge of that table or that bracing box, and you get them right on the edge, and you start to push them off, and that's where they'll learn that if they fall off, they're going to fall, and that's where they'll learn to push back, and that's where you can get that brace going. Basically, if you can get them up there and get them bracing real good a couple of times, and then try to bring them back down on the ground and see if they'll brace. So you can kind of do that back and forth. If one wants to quit driving, you can get them on the bracing table again and try to push them off and kind of get them going again. Another thing that you do is get like a large mirror. That deal down there in the bottom right is supposed to be a mirror. And basically that just helps the kid see what the parent is talking about. Sometimes you can say, hey, you need to hold that head up better, or hold his ears down. But a lot of times if you have that mirror, that kind of settles the argument on what needs to be done. It gives some exhibitor feedback on what they might be doing wrong, where they couldn't see it normally. Train to brace, you want their head up, you want their 4 feet kind of square. You can kind of, it should be changing soon. You can kind of see how these goats are out on all fours square. The front feet are level, the back feet are level. And so that's kind of the look you're wanting. You want to push into the goat. It's kind of hard to see on video, but you never want to pull on their head. You want to kind of leave that head, just kind of cradle the head, and then you want to push with your leg. So all the pushing needs to be done with the leg. There doesn't need to be a whole lot of action with your arms. A lot of younger exhibitors will kind of pull that head and push with their leg and try to get them to brace, and that's not going to work. If you pull on their head, you're going to make them mad. They'll jump up on you. Things will not go well. So just kind of cradle that head a little bit. Don't put a lot of pressure on it, and use your leg to do the bracing. And practice. Since we're working at home, when you go into a show, and I hadn't really thought about this until the last couple of years, but you're going to be out there for 20 minutes, probably. So what I would encourage you to do is kind of build up your stamina and build up your sheep or goat stamina, because they're going to be out there for 20 minutes. So if you get used to practicing for 5 minutes and calling it a day, when you go out on the ring and you're out there for 20 minutes, you're going to get wore down. Your animal's going to get wore down. So kind of get used to going in a rhythm. And when you go out there to practice showmanship or leading or whatever you're going to practice that day, remember you need to put in about 20 minutes of work, because that's going to be what it's like when you're out there at the show. You always want to watch for the judge. It should be changing slides soon. You always want to watch for the judge. And what I like to do is, somebody that's kind of starting out, is go watch a couple of classes at the beginning. Kind of, okay, this is how they're doing. This is the way the ringman's setting up the ring, and that's the guy and the judge in the blue shirt. Because the last thing you want to do is go out there and be worried about your goat and not know who the judge is, and then he pulls you and you're not knowing what's going on. So I'd strongly consider just going and watching a class with the parent and the exhibitor, and just so everybody's on the same page of what's going on and how it's going to look and that type of thing. You want to know your goat's best features, like maybe your goat's super thick. You're going to, when you have a rear view, you're going to get a really good look on him. Maybe he's a little coarse in the shoulders. You want to cover that area up with your leg maybe the best you can. Or maybe yours kind of dips in his top and you want to kind of keep his top up as best you can. If you have one that's kind of shorter necked, you might pick his ears up to make him look taller fronted. So there's going to be pros and cons to each animal. So knowing those and kind of knowing how to highlight the good parts is something you need to consider. When you go in, you want to know their weight. You want to know how much feed they eat a day and what kind of feed. That's just a couple of things on showmanship that you need to think about. I know we've been on here a long time, so I'm kind of skipping over a couple of things. I'm going to talk a little bit about clipping, but I'm going to go pretty quick. Most people either use a Lister cover coat blade or a Premier. If you Google Premier, they have an extra cover blade. And basically, I think that leaves 5 millimeters of hair. You can use Lister clippers, really you could use any kind of clipper, but you want to make sure that you have, I think it's 5 millimeters, whatever the cover coat length is. You definitely don't want to go any shorter than that. So you want to do as close to the show as you can. So maybe like the day before you leave or something like that. You want to go from the knee up and the hocks up. So you might have to ask for help for the first couple of times until you guys get it down, or you might want to have somebody come over with their clippers, or you ask them if you can go watch them clip and kind of just see how it's done. That's what I would advise. It's just kind of don't try to reinvent the wheel. Just go see what somebody else is doing and go from there. All right, guys, and then that's it. I appreciate y'all hanging with me. I know I talked a little bit longer than I anticipated. Open for questions if you guys have any.
Zach, I thought that was great. Though you said all the things that I've wanted these kids to hear. So great job. I don't see any questions yet. We'll give it a couple minutes. Couple thank yous. And guys, before you leave, make sure there's a link in the chat box to a Qualtrics survey. It's just, typical survey that we give y'all at the end of programs. Just answer the questions on there, and then we'll also send out the link via email, and then we'll send out a link to watch this recording and the other recordings. That'll probably happen by Friday afternoon or so. I do see a few questions here now. Is it good or bad to let your goat graze or browse? Do you recommend fine or surgical blade for lambs? Yeah, just those two questions.
Okay, as far as the grazing or browsing, like if you have one that really that goes off feed, like I talked about, maybe they ate too much feed or they're having some digestive problems, it might not hurt for them to graze a little bit, but their main feed source needs to be your feed, because that will help them get better food and it'll help them perform better. You want to kind of keep that bodybuilder mentality. Bodybuilders, they need a lot of food. They're eating protein shakes and they're eating lean meat, and so that's what you want, that specialized ration. That's what you want your animal to be eating. On the lamb blades, if it kind of depends. I didn't talk about that a lot, but I would do fines on your south downs and crosses and your fine wools. I would do surgicals on your medium wools. Like if you're going to a jackpot show, it might not hurt to do a fine on your medium wool, because that'll give you a little bit of protection from the funguses and stuff. But if you go to your county show or you go to your major, I would suggest using surgicals.
And earlier we had someone ask if you could share the slides. I assume that wouldn't be a problem, but if you need to edit them or anything and want to resend them to me, then I can share them.
I made a couple slight changes. I'll resend that. And I don't mind you guys sharing that at all.
Perfect. We'll put that out there in a group email to everybody.
All right, thanks. That's all I've got.
Alrighty, well, I think it was great. I hope you guys learned something. I know I did. If you come up with any questions later, just shoot me an email and we'll get them answered for you. Thank y'all.